outside people naturally wouldn't know, and even people who distill don't even think about it. When material, whether it's lavender flowers or rosemary leaves or balsam chips or sandalwood sawdust, the minute it starts to heat, it starts to distill. So this up on top is great, and this is fine. If this was left to sit here till tomorrow, it would start distilling. If it was left to sit until Friday, it would be distilled. Now, what does that mean? It's distilled. Well, where is the oil going? The oil starts to homogenize inside the plant because it's at a vapor state at this point. It's not a liquid state, it's vapor. And so the vapor inside of the fiber of the material can exit and regress in and out of that channel that the molecule pockets lay in very easily, and it all happens just from temperature. The temperature creates the first stage of what's called homogenization, which is part of decomposing of the wood. The decomposing is what allows the enzymes to activate inside the channel that the molecules are in, to break it down, to soften it, to release it so it can go out. Now, if the distillator operator wasn't paying attention to this and left it set for 3 or 4 days, it would decompose, the enzymes will activate, soften the fiber, the oil would then migrate into the channel and homogenize as liquid. So when you put it in the cooker and cook it, you would get liquid more than you would oil. And it would be very, almost brackish type, because it's already had the enzymatic activity taking place between the wood and the oil vapor itself. So that whole interaction. And so when that happens, the distillery is not really anxious about throwing away 50 gallons, or which is what would get produced in a full distillation of sandalwood oil. It wouldn't matter if it was 5 gallons. If you figure 5 gallons at $2,500 a gallon, or $2,500 a quart approximately, so 4 times that for a gallon of sandalwood oil to the operator, he's not really excited about throwing it away. So what happens? What do most companies do with that?
Sell it to other people.
Some do and some don't. What most do is then they cut it. They cut it to make it have the appearance of sandalwood oil by adding synthetic sandalol to it. And it goes out on the market, and that looks fine. But here's the thing with oils. These young people that are pretending to be GC operators have never figured out yet. There's X number of percentage of molecules in every oil. In a GC mass spec operation, you will never see 100% molecules in an essential oil. And why is that? Because there are compounds in there that aren't identified. There's some that are just labeled as unknown because they haven't identified because they're so minute. Now, it's not unusual to identify 98, even up to 99% of the molecules, but you will never identify 100%. But in another company that's out there, they're specialists at it because they come up with their analysis of 320% of 100%. Their lavender oil has 320% molecules in it. So how do you get 320% out of 100%? And they haven't even figured that out yet. It doesn't happen. It's because of all the synthetic molecules they added to it adds up to 320%. And so people, you know, they're marketers and they think, oh, the more molecules, the better it looks. You know, the purer it is. But my point being that in that, we'll say 99% range of molecules that are identifiable, every one of those molecules has a specific percentage range. Might be 0.2, it might be 0.1, but there's always a percentage range. Your top 10 molecules will generally make up 60% of that oil. So when you're looking at your printout, if you know what you're looking at and you look at your molecules, you say, okay, we got 45, 48% sandalwood. That's really good. If you got greater or less than that parameter, then you know something is wrong. Now that doesn't mean the oil has been cut either, because you can distill any oil wrong and come out with a whole different chemistry. You can let, it's like, I showed the guys this just a couple of weeks ago down at the Mona farm. I had to remove a tree in front of our house by our garage because when I bought the house, it was only 6 feet tall. Last week, when we cut it down, it was over 40 feet tall and as big around as this, and it lifted all the cement and was starting to go under the corner of the garage. So Mary, she said, honey, you've got to take that tree down. I said, no, I can't cut a tree down. She said, you got to, it's going to come in the garage. I said, that's okay, it's welcome. But she had different opinions, so the tree's gone. And I have a black eye. No, but anyway, we took the tree down, and of course it's a blue spruce, and you know, I don't want to throw it away, but it was too old. But I did take it down to the farm because I thought, well, this would be a good thing for teaching with. Took it down to the farm, we chipped it, and we put it in the distillery and distilled it, and the oil came out black. And yet this is a beautiful black spruce tree. I mean, Juan, you've seen it, you've been in our homes, Sabina, you've been in our home and seen it. You know, and it's a beautiful, beautiful tree, but it's 40 years old and the oil was black. So it's just kind of like some of us, we get old, if they distilled us, it wouldn't turn out that good. So we're better to be distilled when we're young. So, but oils change in the plant, just like we change inside of us as we age. So there's a time factor of distilling a plant when it's prime and when you keep it in the prime. Now, annual plants like lavender, rosemary, hyssop, plants that we harvest every year, that's really easy to do. You keep it in the prime. Those of you who have been at the winter harvest, you know that we try to keep the trees that we're harvesting under 20 years. Our trees, in fact, those that were winter harvest the last 4 years, know we've been harvesting in an area over, we call it the buffalo pasture, because the neighbor has buffalo. Those trees are between 25 and 30 years old, and the oil production is half of a 15 or 20-year-old tree. So the older they get, the less oil they manufacture, and also the less limbs on the bottom part of the tree because they'll start falling off from not getting adequate sun. So there's so many things that can contribute to producing a bad outcome even with a good plant or good material. And it's just like this right here. If they left this set for 2 or 3 days, the outcome wouldn't be as great as if it was distilled today. So that's why you don't see a lot of bags sitting around here that's already prepared to go, for that very reason. So it happens. The other thing in distillation that's really critical is when you load the chamber, you know, getting the material spread evenly in the chamber, getting it compressed evenly. And when you're distilling chips and sawdust, this is easy to do because it's really easy to get a nice uniform compression within the chamber. If you don't, like when we're distilling lavender or hyssop or goldenrod, clary sage, you know, that are more stemmy plants, it's really easy for them to get in a ball, and then you have a little pocket of air here and another ball, cluster of plants. You get those air pockets down inside of your distillation. When the steam hits those air pockets, it drops the temperature of the steam within 10 to 15 degrees. When that happens, it'll cause condensation to take place right inside the distilling chamber. So you'll reduce the outcome of oil that's pulled out of the material, but that's one part of it. The other part of it is when you create condensation or condensing inside the steam chamber, it doesn't extract all of the molecules. It'll only extract part of them. So it'll leave some of those molecules still inside the fiber of the plant material. And how do you know that? Is when you take the plant material out, you can smell it. It still smells like the oil is there, and it smells that way because it is still there. You got maybe 1/3% of the molecules out. Why did the other molecules stay there? Because the condensing caused the temperature inside the plant material to drop below the extraction need. You've got to have, like this here is going to extract the best at 280 degrees. So if you drop this temperature down to 230 degrees, which you still got steam, it's not going to extract. The molecules are going to stay in that fiber because it's not hot enough to stimulate the enzyme activity enough to open the molecules and activate the enzymes to break that cellulose down to let those molecules out. And so a lot of that oil molecule will stay in the fiber. And that's called homogenizing. And once it homogenizes and goes into the plant fiber, you can't get it back out. You've lost it, period. So then there's the story that you hear about first distillation, second distillation, third distillation. What does that mean? Do we do second, third distillations?
No.
No. Are you sure?
Yes, no, maybe.
The maybe is closer to right for one plant. For one plant only. Okay, so what does it mean? First distillation is what you're seeing from today. So what they'll do is they'll run it for 12 hours, or in our case, if it's black spruce, we'll run it for 4 hours. Blue spruce, 3.5 hours. Balsam, 3 hours. Lavender, an hour and 15 minutes. When that oil has reached what we feel the critical level of production, we shut it off because there's a point of no return. I mean, lavender, you can distill lavender for 3 hours and there'd still be fine molecules coming over. But the cost to run the boiler at $150 an hour for diesel versus getting out 1/16 of an ounce of oil, we'd have to charge you $2,000 a bottle for lavender. So there's that point where we have to cut it off to make it affordable. And I make that determination by distilling and analyzing to determine where the best quality molecules and the best quantity of molecules are at that certain duration time where we cut it off. And once we shut the steam off, distillation is over. In the exception of one plant that Young Living distills 2 times. And I want you to be really clear about this. It's clary sage, all right? There's a molecule in clary sage called sclerol. And it is the most sought after molecule in the clary sage industry, period. Sought after by R.J. Reynolds, the tobacco company. They use sclerol as a tobacco flavoring and stabilizer. So they want all the sclerol they can get out of a plant. Clary sage only runs at about 2%, 2.5% sclerol. There's been some cases on certain years that they've seen sclerol go up as high as 4.6%. R.J. Reynolds has the largest clary sage fields in America, and they distill it strictly for the sclerol. They extract the sclerol off through flash freezing and crystallization, and then the rest of the clary sage is sold to Young Living. Thank you. Thank you. No, it's not. It's sold to other oil companies that you know. All right? But because they don't care about that little bit of sclerol missing in clary sage. And it's really easy to buy synthetic sclerol and put back in it, even though sclerol is relatively expensive to manufacture. I made a discovery in 1996 that revolutionized clary sage distilling. And it was just, in my opinion, an act of God. We were distilling clary sage, been running for 45 minutes. We had most of the molecules over, and the water supply line to the boiler broke underground. So naturally we shut down really quick, and as I was going to get the backhoe to start digging up the water line so we could fix it, I turned to my crew as they said, well, Gary, what do you want us to do? And I said, well, go ahead and start unloading and clean it out. We'll reload so when I got the line fixed, we can be ready to go again. Because, you know, in my mind, there's no point in going any further. And as I walked across the distillery yard to get on the tractor, just this little voice that said, no, wait. And I stopped and I almost went, what? It was so audible to me. And I turned around to the crew and I said, guys, wait, we're going to try an experiment. They looked at me, what do you mean, Gary? And I said, we're going to try an experiment. Let's just leave it. Let's just leave it. And so we did. It took us an hour and a half to get the water line fixed, get the boiler back on, get it back up to temperature. And then we distilled again. And I distilled for another 45 minutes. Our sclerol came out at 7.2%. And it was a shock to the whole industry because when I called my partner, Jean-Noel, in France, and told him and Marcel about getting this level of sclerol, they said, Gary, come on, that's not possible. So I sent the oil to them. Dr. Casablanca analyzed it, confirmed to them that yes, I was right. They couldn't believe it. They wanted to know how I did it because Marcel had been distilling clary sage for 40 years and his father before him and before him and before him had never seen it. Well, what happened? By shutting the distillery down and resting it, allowed the enzymes to activate the cellulose in the fiber of the clary sage stems where the sclerol resided and allowed it to come out. Now, we didn't get a lot of other molecules, but we got sclerol. So when we distill clary sage, and incidentally, when Jean-Noel and Benoit distilled clary sage in France, they distilled for 45 minutes, shut down for 30 minutes, and distilled for 45 minutes again to get the sclerol. Then both batches are mixed together as one. That is the only case where there's two distillations with one plant in Young Living. And now other people have heard about it, caught on to it. But what is the true form of first distillation, second distillation, third distillation? I'll tell you. This is first distillation. Now, if I was going to do a second distillation, I would send all you the sugars home. And I would back in a Dow chemical truck and hook it to the boiler. So the chemicals went across the steam and into this, because with chemicals in the steam, I can extract more oils out of the sandalwood. So they do a second distillation with chemicals, and then they will even do a third distillation with chemicals. That happens even in the commercial industry with lavandin. So you have first, second, third distillation. But it's all done with chemical extraction and steam, not pure steam. Because if I fired up that, I could let that distillery set overnight with the sandalwood sawdust in it, come back tomorrow, fire it up, and distill it again, and I would get some more oil, but it'd be almost black. And it wouldn't be anything that I would consider using. So it's not worth it, but there are companies that will take that and then they will structure it what they want and put it out there on the market as a second distillation. So there's a lot of false information. There's a lot of adulterating that takes place other than just in a laboratory cutting the oil. I even watch it where they'll take lavandin and distill them together in the same cook. And then they will restructure that after it comes off. They will take Melissa, which is commonly called lemon balm, and distill it with lemongrass to call it Melissa. And that's really common. I've watched them distill in the Reunion Islands. I've watched them distill lemongrass and citronella and bottle it as Melissa. They're so much, in the cinnamon industry, the same thing. Cassia is widely available, and it's a beautiful oil, but it has different properties, as you know. But cassia now is going into the market structured to look like cinnamon because it's cheaper and more readily available. So as we go forward, you're gonna, and I will, because I'm making this a point now, as I'm restructuring the seed to sale process, to have a education page that they're building now to go on the internet that we'll be able to put information on, like a newsletter, to keep people informed of what's going on in the farms and different ways that people adulterate, different ways they cut, you know, different ways of distillation that can change things. And then you've got hydro distillation, you've got dry steam distillation, you've got wet steam distillation. All different types of distillation can change the outcome of the oil as well. So if you don't understand distillation, you don't have a way of knowing what type of oil and what quality of oil you should have from a distillation. So if you're just a broker and you're going to a farm, like a broker could come here and check the oil and say, oh, this seems really good, and you wouldn't know the difference. And it could have been a hydro distillation of sandalwood, which would reduce the sandalwood in the sandalwood oil, but he wouldn't know it. So essential oil industry, I could probably be safe in saying, without even an exaggeration, that it's one of the most corrupt cartels in the world, because it was created for the perfume industry, number one, and number two, the food flavoring industry. And the perfume industry, they don't care one molecule from another. It's the cost, what it takes to get that. And so they drive the prices down. They drive the farmer to put on heavy chemicals to try to maximize production. You know, it's a whole cycle of what goes on to drive the market. And when you understand that the perfume industry dictates 80% of the essential oil world market, what's called aromatherapy falls on the bottom 2%. So they don't have a voice. And because the aromatherapy market, as it's called for us, doesn't have a voice, that's why I started developing farms. Because I knew that I would not live long enough to impact the essential oil industry and dictate a standard that I wanted. And I knew the only way that I could create a standard that I wanted for my people was to create it and develop myself. And the only way I could do that was by controlling the fields and the distillation. So this year I'm making a huge push with all of our partner growers and distillers out there that we're going to downsize our vendors to just a few that we're controlling 100%. You know, I'd like to say we're controlling 100% now, but it wouldn't be true, because we can't reach out to 40 different growers right now and keep an eye on all 40 of them during the harvest and during the distillation. I have to rely on their integrity and their honesty. And for the most part, they've done a really well job. But we're just taking it to the next step higher now, to where Young Living will be monitoring every single oil that's distilled in Young Living this year. And there'll be no question.